Hi guys, I'm Matt Schlicht with ZapChain, and I'm here with Adam Draper, the founder of Boost VC, which is pretty much the most prominent Bitcoin investment firm.
Some people have said the Harvard of Bitcoin. I'm,
Just throwing that out there.
just throwing it out there. Just wanted to say that.
So if you guys want to go to the Harvard of Bitcoin, Adam's the guy to talk to you. But so welcome to the Bitcoin course. Thank you for helping us educate people about Bitcoin, get people excited. As you probably know, Bitcoin can be pretty confusing.
Super confusing.
Super confusing. And so all these people have probably decided it's confusing, but for some reason they've also decided they're going to watch us talk and explain it to them.
Perfect.
So tell us a little bit about Boost VC.
Okay, so actually, I think what I'll do is I'll tell you a bit about how I got into Bitcoin, and then also how I started Boost, because it sort of goes in sequence, so that makes sense.
I'm okay with that.
If you're okay with that. So actually, I have a very unique entry into Bitcoin. I was fortunate enough to reach out to a guy named Brian Armstrong, who's CEO of Coinbase, when he was fundraising for his seed round, and I sort of read the description of his company, and I said, "Oh, that's really interesting. This magic money thing, I don't understand what digital currency is." That's basically what I was thinking.
What was the description of Coinbase? Just because someone might not
It was marketplace for digital currency. I believe that's what it
magic
said.
money.
That's what it said. So in my mind, I was thinking, well, magic money or like credit card points. Like those were the two things that passed through my head. And I was like, well, those are both sort of big ideas, but I don't really understand it yet. So why don't I reach out to them?
Right.
And so I emailed, basically, here's a trick. When a company starts, normally the founder picks their first name and then at their domain name as their email address. So if you ever want to reach a CEO or a founder of a company, just do that.
I don't know why people don't understand that. They always think it's like, he
Super
probably has some like
complicated.
secret email that like nobody can reach him in.
Yeah. And so that was my, I reached out to Brian at Coinbase.com and I said, hey, I would love to meet, you're raising money. I would love to hear more about what you're doing. And so we met in downtown Mountain View, and and he pitched me this concept of Bitcoin, and I also, so he didn't pitch me his company yet. I said the one thing that he didn't want said, which was, so what's Bitcoin? And he felt like, it was sort of like he was super disheartened because he had to pitch so many people on what Bitcoin was. So Bitcoin companies today have it easy because most investors know what Bitcoin is now. 2 years ago, Brian had to go through and explain what Bitcoin was to every single investor. And so you can thank him for laying the groundwork for everyone else.
When he met with you, he was probably like, he woke up, he was probably like, maybe today.
Maybe today is the day that I don't have to explain what Bitcoin is.
And then he was really excited, and then you're like, so what is it? He's like, oh.
God, not another one. That's sort of what I felt like went through his head. I'll ask him someday whether or not that's what went through his head. But he started explaining Bitcoin to me, and the two things I grabbed from Bitcoin were, that it was this, so if 2008 proved anything to me was that we're a global economy, but there's no currency that ties the world together. If something bad happens to any country, especially the United States, like it happens to all the countries. But there's no currency that actually ties all of that into like one big web. And I felt that that was a very powerful concept, like traveling the world without having to cash out of a currency was a very powerful thing. The other thing that I really got excited about was the fact that it had already had a crash in 2011. The price of Bitcoin had gone from $30 to $0. And the reason that I was excited that it had crashed is because I felt it mitigated a lot of the risk. When I was talking to Brian, the price of Bitcoin was already at about $15 per Bitcoin, which proved to me that there was a passionate community around this thing that willed it into existence.
Right.
And so that's the thing that really captivated me, was that the community around Bitcoin was so strong. And so Brian, he went through what Bitcoin was, and I was like, okay, I get the basic premise. I knew nothing.
You said that?
Yeah, I was paraphrasing. I get it.
I get it. It's easy.
Yeah, super simple. No, those were literally the only two things that I really understood about Bitcoin. Like later on, I found out about this thing called the blockchain, and like that was a rabbit hole in itself, and so that was interesting. But talked to him, and then he was pitching his business on top of it, and he was saying how like he wanted merchants to be able to accept Bitcoin through being able to accept Bitcoin as payment.
Right.
But what he found was that no one was able to buy Bitcoin in order to buy things with Bitcoin.
Right.
And so he was like one step ahead. And so he said, so I created this really, really easy way for people to be able to buy Bitcoin. And he created the user interface that most people use today. Millions of wallets have been created on Coinbase today to be able to purchase Bitcoin. So he's a broker of Bitcoin today. And he also is doing merchant services. And he, since my investment, has, I believe I was one of two individuals in that, maybe three individuals in that round, and Funders Club funded some of it. And then after us, about 6 months after us, Union Square Ventures put in $5 million with Ribbit Capital, a couple other people, and then Andreessen Horowitz put in about 25. So they've raised about $32 million. They're definitely one of the leaders in the space, the leader from my perspective, doing a really important thing, just sort of making Bitcoin more legitimate. It makes it like, when you look at Coinbase's brand, it feels more like a financial service company than sort of there's this negative connotation around Bitcoin that they're trying to wipe away.
Well, I mean, and over the past 9 months, Coinbase has been pretty focused on getting really big brand name merchants to start accepting Bitcoin.
Completely.
So like Dell, DirecTV, Overstock, and I mean, it's almost the best marketing campaign Bitcoin has ever had, because now you hear Bitcoin and you're like, oh, Dell, I can buy a Dell with Bitcoin. I mean,
I can buy like a mattress on Overstock.com.
Yeah.
So like they have everything from computers to, you know, the beddings.
Right.
Yeah.
Wide range of things.
Yeah, wide range of stuff you can buy online with Bitcoin through Coinbase.
So you decided to invest in Coinbase immediately when you were meeting with him and he explained to you what Bitcoin was?
So no. So what happened was I said, this is really interesting, but I'm going to, I need to do some research. Because I was not an expert on Bitcoin. Obviously, that was my first like conversation about Bitcoin in total.
So were you thinking like, this could be cool? Like you walked away from the coffee shop in Mountain View, and what are you thinking? You're like, I just met with this bald guy and he pitched me Coinbase and it sounds like magic money.
So I was thinking, okay, so Brian pitched, at first he told me his background, and his background was super impressive. He had tried to start a couple companies, he had worked at Airbnb, and one of the main thing that really drew me to basically walking away with a really positive, like this might work thought process was, here's this, he was a solo founder, super talented engineer and super talented just entrepreneur. And he was about to dedicate the next 10 years of his life towards building a company around a market size that was only $200 million in total. Like that was the entire market of Bitcoin.
Which by the way, everyone,
that's a very small market.
Really tiny.
That's a very tiny market.
Usually it's like, and the market's $100 billion or $500 billion.
Yeah, huge billions, trillions. And so I was sort of thinking, why is this super talented individual trying to start a company in this industry that's so small unless he knows something we don't? And he was so passionate about it that made me walk away with the idea that I did not commit to him in that meeting. And rarely do investors commit in the first meeting. But I said, okay, I need to do some due diligence. I need to talk to different people. And so I asked him for a couple references. He sent me to a couple people who were sort of passionate about the space. And I met with all of them. I met with, I think, 3 or 4 people in order to do my sort of diligence on Coinbase and Bitcoin in general. I was like, and all of them were super passionate engineers. Like all of them were super passionate engineers, and they all spoke way above my head. Like I understood about 30% of what they were saying about the blockchain, about Bitcoin, about everything. And so,
which probably made you like slightly mad, but also like super excited.
But it was like they were so passionate about it and so excited by, like, you always feed off of passionate people. Like you get the energy, you feel the energy, and I was like, I think there's something here, and I think Brian's going to do something, even whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's whatever the thing is. And so then during my due diligence process, about 3 weeks later, most of the most important decisions in the world are decided on the toilet. And so I was actually in my bathroom, and I had this stack of Economist magazines that were right next to my toilet. By the way, this is a story I've never told publicly, and now I know that this is going to be going out to
millions of people
probably a lot
right
of people right now.
Yeah.
And so I was reading this magazine that had been on my next to my toilet for about probably a year and a half, 2 years. It was like a 2011 magazine, Economist magazine, and I'd read it 15 times.
That day?
No, 15 times in general.
Oh,
like,
okay.
like I had gone through all these Economist magazines multiple times, and like I was reading through it this day, and I was in the process of sort of doing due diligence, and I was like, am I in? Am I out? And so then I'm reading through this magazine, and there's this huge write-up on Bitcoin, like an enormous write-up on Bitcoin, and it was when the price of Bitcoin had jumped up to about $20 per Bitcoin. So there's about at that time, it was probably like $100 million worth of Bitcoin, based off of how many Bitcoins had been released. And so I was reading this article, and I was like, this is so interesting that like it had captivated an audience of viewership before, like a year and a half before I had even stumbled upon it. And so that right after that, basically, so I had met Brian. I said that was one of my yeses. I was sort of like, there's something interesting in this Bitcoin space, so that was sort of like yeah, I'm okay with that. I'd met with all of these engineers. I was like, this is really exciting. And then my fourth yes was like this magazine that had Bitcoin in it. And then right after that,
when you got out of the bathroom.
Whenever I got out of the bathroom, right after that, I called Brian and I said, I'm in. And then I explained that entire thought process to him, and I'm sure he was just like, thanks for the money. But he's like the nicest guy. He still receives feedback awesomely well. He's still, he's just so humble and awesome. He's such a great leader.
He probably got off the phone and he was like, next to like someone was like, Adam just called me and said he's in, but he like just got out of the bathroom.
Story about the bathroom. Yeah. So it's sort of a funny.
You're like the bathroom
story.
investor.
Yeah. So that was my first entry into Bitcoin.
Right.
Okay, which was really, really fun, really, really exciting. What was really interesting was 2 weeks later I was starting Boost, which is the best, the Harvard of Bitcoin startups, and also other types of startups.
But less like Harvard. I mean, Harvard you have to pay a lot of money to.
Yes, so we actually provide housing, office space, and we invest money. So we actually pay you to start your companies and learn.
It's like the opposite.
It's like the opposite of Harvard. Actually, it's more like starting a company, and we help you do that
with money.
With money, and we give you
network.
and housing and a network, and it's really fun because we surround you with passionate people who can help you build your company.
Right.
And so we were starting literally 2 weeks after I met with Brian, and for our first session, when you're starting an accelerator, it was really about keeping the wheels on the bus and making sure that all the wheels and the doors and everything didn't just fall off. So we just wanted to keep everything on while this thing was driving at 60 miles per hour. And so we started a session that was it was a broad session. We weren't focused on any particular industry.
What is a session?
Sorry, a session, it's 3 months where we do provide housing and office space, and we accept a certain number of companies. We've worked our way up to about 26, but in our first session it was 7 companies. And during that session, we bring in weekly speakers, a speaker once a week, who can sort of add value of knowledge and a network because they're very smart and they've done cool things.
Right, and so you give each of the companies investment too.
And we give each of the companies investment. So right. we invest between $10,000 and $20,000 for about 6% of the company. And so then we also bring in mentors who help give feedback to each of the companies throughout the program. And so we were basically, for that first session, the first tribe of companies, we were just trying to make sure that we could do this and do it well. And so we accepted 7 companies. We went through the program. We brought in mentors. We brought in speakers. We surrounded them with our network, which is pretty strong in Silicon Valley. And then at the end of the session, actually 6 of the 7 companies raised additional money. So it sort of gave us a stamp of legitimacy that we could run a successful program. But we realized that we wanted to be more focused than super broad. we wanted people to know us for something. And so we were looking at, in between the first and the second session, we were looking at different technologies we wanted to be able to really put our weight behind.
Right.
And we looked at drones, and drones I believe are really interesting. But 18 months ago, they were really popular, and that's when we were just making this decision. It was about February of 2013, and we were. But there are really only like 2 use cases for drones, and one's taco delivery. And so I didn't see it as like a platform. I didn't see it as like there are going to be tons of these. I saw it as like.
Did you say taco delivery?
Yeah, so like taco.
Tacos.
Tacos.
I understand. I can appreciate this.
Okay, yes. So it's a good use case. It's just they're very. I didn't see it as tons of use cases. I'm sure there are a lot of people who would debate me on that.
Quesadillas.
But at that time, I still think we're about 50 years out from that being like a hugely used thing. Then we looked at 3D printing. 3D printing is really interesting. I was very excited about it. There had already been a lot of 3D printing startups, though. There were, and it's very capital intensive to start one.
Right.
And we're still very interested. We've actually backed 2 3D printing companies through Boost at this point. But then we were looking at Bitcoin, and we were sort of thinking, well, there are only really 5 companies in this space, but there's tons of opportunity. It's basically revolutionizing the way the financial markets work. What happens, and so the 5 companies at the time were Mt. Gox, there's one called Bitfloor, Bitstamp, Coinbase, and BitPay. There might have been another one in that also, but those were the 5 that anyone would know in the space would even know. And we were thinking, well, what happens if we just double the population of Bitcoin companies? What happens if we create the Bitcoin mafia and just like throw it into the ecosystem and put this stamp of like, we think this is an industry on them? And so we decided that we were going to be backing Bitcoin companies. We announced it, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. So I had about 150 people reach out to me. So it was like investors, entrepreneurs, and enthusiasts reach out to me just to talk Bitcoin. It was like very 18 months ago, it was very popular to just talk Bitcoin. And it still is actually, but 18 months ago it was like on another level. And so over the next month, I was not an expert on Bitcoin at the beginning of that month. Even though I had invested in Coinbase, I had some familiarity, but then I was definitely not an expert. When we made that announcement, 150 people reached out to me. I met with every single one over the course of about a month and a half. And at the end of that month and a half, I was an expert, definitely. Like I knew where everyone stood, I knew where all the opportunities were, I knew all that stuff. So that's how we got into Bitcoin, was we really wanted, and also at that time, it was a risk. We were the first investors to actually say like, we believe this is going to be an industry. And it could have gone either way. It could have gone like, people just fizzled and forgot about it. But the community got really excited that an investor was actually trying to support their community, their ecosystem. So it ended up going really, really well. And we were able to sort of partner our Boost brand with Bitcoin as Bitcoin rose up. And about 6 weeks after, so Bitcoin, when we announced, was about $25 per Bitcoin, $25, $30 per Bitcoin. When 6 weeks later, it was at about $250 per Bitcoin. And so we're
not saying there's a correlation.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying anything, but it was very exciting to be a part of that quick ride.
Right.
And
you'd already like gone in.
We'd already gone in.
You had like street cred.
Yeah, it was like I had street cred because we were excited about it, and then it happened.
In before the rise.
If it had risen and then we did it, it was sort of like.
And that's what all those other like follow-on bandwagon people did.
Yeah, all the bandwagon people, but which we love. We love everyone who's in the ecosystem.
Because you guys are the same, and we like you as much.
No, and it's not really bandwagon. There is this initial resistance to like the Bitcoin concept because people are thinking magic money, that's stupid, crazy. There are some bad actors who have been in the industry, and so like they put a taint on the ecosystem. But then once you get past that, all of a sudden you see a lot of opportunity, and I feel like a lot of people went through that during that run up. We were just lucky to do it before the run up.
Yeah, I mean the run up, like when the price of Bitcoin increases, definitely more people get interested in it. I mean, like that's when I got interested for sure, because Bitcoin rose to like $1,200. Way after that.
So then you bought.
No, I didn't. No, I didn't buy it. I realized that I'd bought Bitcoins in 2011 or 2010.
No.
And then I forgot about them because magic internet money, it's for crazy people.
Yeah.
And then they were in Mt. Gox. I was like, I'm pretty sure I have Bitcoins. And now they're like worth $1,300. I should go find them. Figured out my Mt. Gox password, got in there, had a decent number of numbers on the balance there. And then I couldn't get them out because Mt. Gox.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
That's a bummer.
So then I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back and get my money back from Bitcoin and go do Bitcoin companies.
Yeah,
so,
I'm excited about this.
Yeah, I'm excited about this.
Good. Well, now we've backed 27 Bitcoin companies, 67 companies overall, but 27 are Bitcoin. Over the next 3 years, we'll be backing 100 Bitcoin companies. That's sort of our pledge to the ecosystem. We're still very excited about it. We see a lot of innovation in the space, and I feel that we've been a big proponent and been able to sort of launch a lot of the early stage, cool, crazy ideas in the space.
Yeah, I mean,
like
you were saying that there were 5 like known Bitcoin companies in the beginning, and now what? 2 years later?
2 years later, they're
you've
500 or something, and we've already done 27.
And you've done your part.
Yeah, and
which
we've
is
done
huge.
a big percentage of it.
So I think there's like not a lot of people that have invested in nearly, the amount of Bitcoin companies you've invested in, and because you've been watching this industry for 2 years and somehow had the opportunity to start out with Coinbase, which is killing it right now.
Yeah, that was lucky.
But you did it.
Yeah,
and
I know.
And you jumped on it,
trigger.
and you kept going.
I haven't pulled the trigger on a lot of things, so I'm pretty happy about that one.
So I think you have an interesting perspective on the Bitcoin space. So what innovation have you kind of like seen so far that you've invested in? And then maybe, like, what are you looking for next? Like, maybe if someone out there is working on a company or they're thinking about doing it, what are the next innovative ideas for Bitcoin that you're looking for?
Yeah, so there's a lot of really interesting things. So first, we broke up all of the applications that we got into about 8 sectors inside of Bitcoin, and I hope I can list. Probably can't list them all, but the exchanges, payment processors, wallets, there's gambling, there's security, there's basically we broke them up. There's blockchain technologies, there's mining, and I think that was basically all of it. So
media.
And media. Media was one of them because it's sort of an interesting thing. You need media to be able to support a sector. It's very fascinating. TechCrunch did it really, really well for early stage technology companies, and now Follow the Coins, AppChain are all doing it very, very well. For CoinDesk are all doing it really well for Bitcoin. So that's sort of a fun thing. Growing within industry is really great. So right now, what's happening is there's a lot of money going into payment processors and exchanges, and it's because it's a very transactional business model. You make money when someone transacts into Bitcoin or comes out of Bitcoin. And by the way, Coinbase I put under broker, which would be under exchanges. So that there are a bunch of those brokers being launched in different countries, and we have actually backed a lot of those. And the reason is you have to think about what Bitcoin enables in order to think about the opportunities, and what it really enables is cross-border transactions. Like the first real great use case is cross-border transactions. And currently, banks have a monopoly on sending money around the world. So if I want to send money to Korea or send money somewhere else, the bank can charge whatever they want. And it's a really interesting thing that happens. And Western Union and all those guys are a part of that because there are a lot of little pieces that are taken along the way. But really, the banks have this monopoly. It's similar to what I would liken it to is sort of like Skype. So originally, the telecom companies had a monopoly on long-distance calls. They were able to charge whatever they wanted per minute to be able to do a long-distance call anywhere in the world. And it was really expensive. It was like $5 per minute to call Nigeria or whatever. So what Skype did that was really fascinating was they said, hey, here's some technology. It's voice over IP, peer-to-peer. And if you're in the network, it's free. But if you call outside the network, you're going to have to pay something because we have to deal with the telecom companies.
Right.
Same thing's happening with Bitcoin right now. So for the banks used to be able to charge whatever they wanted. And now what's happening is Bitcoin, as an open source peer-to-peer technology, is saying if you're in the network, you can send this value around the world for free. But if you have to cash in, cash out at a brokerage or an exchange, we're going to charge you a percentage. And I think it's a very reasonable thing, and I think it's working really, really well. Suddenly, by setting up these brokerages in every country, we're creating a remittance network. Bitcoin itself is, you're able to send value around the world, but you need these brokers in every country in order to be able to cash in and cash out.
Right.
And so, I think what Coinbase is doing, they just spread to Europe. We have one called CoinMotion that's also in Europe that covers a couple other countries. And it's really exciting because suddenly you're able to cash into a Coinbase account, send money to Europe, and then cash out. And that basically, that used to cost between 5 and 15% to be able to cash in, cash out. And suddenly you can do it for 1%, 2% of like the cash that you're sending. That's really exciting, and those margins are going to slim down even more and more, and suddenly we're going to be doing transactions on a global scale where we can like tour the world and just swipe credit cards everywhere. Yep. Or whatever the thing is, QR codes, or we'll figure out.
You'll just know. You'll be like, I want the sandwich, and then you paid for it.
And so the other thing that I'm still bullish on that, but I think it's sort of we're towards the end where like the companies that are going to take over that space are in the industry. And then payment processors, there's Snapcard, there's BitPay, there's Bitpagos does a little of both in Argentina. They're very transactional. They enable Bitcoin all over the place, and you're able to transact and buy things, which is really exciting. So we're interested in those things. We're interested in those because they're very clear business models, and if you have a unique way of getting into it, that is very valuable. Right. And in order to think Bitcoin, you need to be thinking globally. You have to be thinking like, well, Coinbase is in the U.S., but they're not going to suddenly launch in Australia, China, and Latin America. So like, if we're going to help this remittance network, if we're going to help this just payment network get off the ground, suddenly there needs to be more of that type of business. And so that's why that's been happening. We're also excited about infrastructure. So Bitcoin itself is fragile in some ways, and like there's scaling issues a little bit, some are everywhere. And so what's really exciting, and I do believe that a lot of people need to start putting more money towards building the Bitcoin protocol itself. Yep. I think every company that has the money should be putting a little money towards a developer that can work on the Bitcoin open source protocol. But we are also backing infrastructure companies. So there's a company called BlockCypher that's in this session that is creating APIs for Bitcoin companies, basically making it like plug and play Bitcoin company to start a Bitcoin company, create wallets, multi-sig, webhooks, lots of things like that. And so that's a really exciting space. If I were to go into the API space, I would probably find one thing that is not in existence that's really, really needed, and build it and make it very, very good so that you can own a little segment and then grow outward from there. For those people who are thinking about starting sort of software infrastructure for Bitcoin, I would find like what one problem is and make it be able to scale up a little bit. BlockCypher recently solved the 10-minute transaction time problem, or at least upped the percentage. Like, they created a way in which you can, with 99% certainty in 10 seconds, know whether or not the transaction goes through.
Right, and so for everyone watching, the problem there before that was that it takes like 10 minutes to confirm the transaction.
In the blockchain. Yes.
Right, and so if you're like, imagine going to the store and spending something, buying something with Bitcoin, and they're like, okay, please wait here for 10 minutes so we can confirm that your Bitcoin actually went through.
Yes.
And that, like, nobody's going to do that ever. Yeah. So BlockCypher just figured out how to
they solved it and in a very short period of time, they can clear, with a percentage of certainty, they can clear it.
Like 99.99.
99.99999. Right. And it's a really great piece of technology, and that's a very exciting space. There's also infrastructure on the mining side. So, I don't want this to be a big plug. I'm trying to use these examples to highlight different types of companies that can be in the ecosystem. And we have a company called HashRabbit that is trying to create the operating system for mining systems. Not trying, they've built it. But miners are like the core infrastructure layer for all of Bitcoin. And a lot of people trivialize this a little bit. Like, it's really important that mining works for the entire ecosystem, and it isn't like the mining companies should only have to deal with the hardware aspect of it, and then someone needs to come in and standardize everything else. And so that's what HashRabbit is trying to do. They're trying to standardize all the software that all the miners use. And it's a really important piece of the ecosystem to make sure that vulnerabilities aren't there, all that stuff isn't there. So then security is really, really important. All these companies are essentially financial companies.
Yep.
And we need the best possible security. They need to like start with a small amount of money, and they also need, you know, bank grade institutional security, which is sort of a problem. So we've been finding a couple companies that are in that space. Crowdcurity is helping. That is helping user-generated bug bounty programs.
Yep.
Yeah, and so security is really, really important. If you come up with, you know, the Cloudflare of Bitcoin, the VeriSign of Bitcoin, that sort of thing, we're really excited about that industry. But if so that's sort of the present day stuff. And I know I went all over the place, but that's like we're seeing a lot of that type of business, payment processors all the way. And then gambling is actually the most used use case, but we haven't really. We backed Arbiter, which is it enables gambling in apps with Bitcoin, with actually other types of currencies also. But generally, that's been, as far as, and that's a very venture backable business, but generally gambling websites are not as venture backable because they're all very similar. And but it is a big use case. It helps a lot of transactions happen. As far as the future goes, I'm really, really excited. I think that there is this, there needs to be this spreading of Bitcoin as a payment network across the world. So we need all these gateways such as Coinbase, CoinMotion in Europe, Bitpagos Argentina, Volabit in Mexico, Palarin in Philippines, CoinHako in Singapore. We need all of this infrastructure of a payment network, payment gateways created,
right,
so that we can create the real first use case for Bitcoin. From there, I think there will be a lot more things built on top of it. It's also, Bitcoin's really, really great for the unbanked because suddenly it brings their infrastructure up to what, the US is like the worst place that Bitcoin could have taken off because we're 93% digital already. We trust our banks. Like, there are a lot of things that are good about the United States financial infrastructure. There are probably some bad things too, but there are a lot of good things. In Nigeria, they're like 10% banked or something like that, and that means they don't trust their banks. They're all nationalized. There are a lot of problems in that space.
Well, they can't even build up wealth.
Yeah, they can't even build up wealth to do it.
To do anything.
And the money they're all storing in their mattresses, and so, but they all have cell phones.
Right.
And suddenly, with this mobile boom that's happened across the world, with Bitcoin, you can enable payments everywhere. And that's a very exciting thing. And so we're looking at the payment side as sort of the first use case for Bitcoin. Second generation, and that needs to happen for second generation to really work. Like, you need a mass adoption. You need people to be really excited about this payment space. The next level is really smart contracts on the blockchain. So blockchain technology is the true innovation in Bitcoin. And they solved the Byzantine generals problem, which is how do you make a trusted transaction happen between two non-trusted parties,
right,
without a third party. So right now, if I want to buy your shirt off you, which I do, I would have to use Visa. I would have to use a bank.
This costs 10 Bitcoins, by the way.
Let's see here. 2 years ago, it would have been a $200 shirt or something like that. Now it's a $5,000
really
shirt.
expensive.
Really expensive shirt. I would have to use third parties like Visa, the bank, Wells Fargo, or whatever bank you're using. Now with Bitcoin, it actually clears. So all you use is technology. Technology assesses the transaction goes through, which is really exciting. That's the exciting part. And you can start to log other things than just money or value in the blockchain. You can start to log, or things of value. So you can start to log, real estate leases, make sure that you can automate contracts so that everything that is in the contract, if there's a trigger event, like happens, like all the money gets distributed. Suddenly, like the legal system is more efficient, and all of these terms were in the contract, so it just happens. There's no like fudging anything.
So like if like a company could use a smart contract on the blockchain so that when they got acquired, that would be the trigger event, and then all the money could go to their investors.
Yes, and that's a really exciting way that the venture capital industry can start to use Bitcoin.
Because you'd get your money way faster.
Way faster. Yeah, hopefully.
Yeah.
Well, they'd get their money from me also way faster, probably.
Right.
If they just like clicked, okay, I agree these terms, and then like we fund them with Bitcoin. Or
that would be cool.
Yeah,
because that could be the trigger event.
Yeah, that could be one of the trigger events.
So smart contracts.
And smart contracts, and then so I do think that's sort of second generation stuff. And you know, we do have essentially a smart contract company in this batch called Hedgy that's helping you be able to hedge on Bitcoin, which is a very exciting concept, and they're basically using the blockchain to do it. So that's a pretty exciting thing. There are a lot of companies that are in that trying to enter into that space. I haven't seen any other than really Hedgy and Valrum who have made any real headway.
So do you think that people, like a company's going to come along and they're going to provide like a tremendous amount of different smart contracts, or do you think it's going to be very, very focused?
Focused. I think the only way that you can penetrate the market is you say, we do venture capital smart contracts.
Right.
And then you like make the best venture capital smart contracts. And then and you make it like work exactly how the VC industry works already, and then make it a little more efficient later. And you know, the VC industry will say thank you because a lot of our fees come from lawyers.
Right.
But that I think you need to be industry focused. I also have a philosophy on focus that if you're starting a company, you really need to own something. Like we ended up owning Bitcoin, and that ended up being able to broaden our horizons to other types of companies.
Right.
But we are known for Bitcoin, which brings people to us. Which is a very exciting thing. I think other industries, other companies, one of the things I always harp on in all of our companies here is that focus is the most important thing, where you should narrow your focus as much as you possibly can, own it, find a like small number of users who really, really loves this product, and then broaden it from that point. Yeah, so that's sort of our thing.
So if anybody watching is actually working on a smart contract company for the blockchain, or they're going to,
yes,
like, and they want to join the Harvard but not Harvard of Bitcoin.
Exactly.
Exactly. How, like, and they could use some investment, and they could use a network of a lot of Bitcoin people.
Yeah, email me at adam@boost.vc.
There you go. Yeah. Email Adam. Get into Boost.
Yeah, perfect.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much for helping us with the Bitcoin course. It's been super interesting getting your perspective from because as an investor, I think you're looking at this differently than like an engineer is, or someone that's just starting up a company. And so I think it's super useful, especially like the future of Bitcoin, and kind of talking about how once we get all the different countries set up with their individual exchanges, how then the world, basically, we can send money anywhere, and we're not going to be losing percentages.
Yeah, I do have to look at it, like as an investor, we have to look at it on a broad scale. We can't get we have to look at each individual thing and see how it looks at on the big picture level. And what I'm seeing that Bitcoin is, so Bitcoin really, everyone overcomplicates Bitcoin a little bit. Because in the end, the consumer is the one who interacts with it, and it's pretty easy. It's a payment method right now, and there are some cool things that you can do with the technology. But really what it is it made fintech sexy.
Yeah.
Like suddenly we tricked all the best engineers in the world, and I don't mean tricked in a bad way, but like into working on financial technology financial fintech companies. Suddenly there are companies that are starting like AML, anti-money laundering, and know your customer technology, so that they can help the Bitcoin ecosystem. Anti-money laundering and know your customer is like relatively, boring and
not
sexy. And suddenly they're working on it because they know that they will be able to help Bitcoin companies.
Yeah,
that's a very exciting thing. Fraud prevention, being able forensics in the blockchain, like all these. There's tons of cool infrastructure for financial technology that's suddenly being upgraded.
Right. It's like finance.
Yeah.
Not sexy. Finance plus Bitcoin.
Super
exciting.
And that's basically all that everyone's doing is they're all updating financial technology, and that's super exciting.
It's like we can go beat Wall Street now.
Yes, that's basically, or join Wall Street. Like they have a very good financial hub over there. But yes,
They can join us.
Yeah, they can join the revolution that is
yeah.
Bitcoin financial technology stuff. And I think in 3 years, one of the reasons that I made the claim 7 months ago or something that in 3 years we'll do 100 Bitcoin companies, and there were barely 100 Bitcoin companies at the time. But in 3 years, it's not going to be like you're starting a Bitcoin company. It's going to be you're starting a financial technology company, and then we assume you use Bitcoin because otherwise it doesn't. What are you doing? Yeah, what are you doing? Like when the internet started, everyone was starting an internet company. And then when it evolved, it was just we're starting a technology company, and if you're not using the internet, I don't know what you've been doing the last 20 years.
Yeah.
You know, like that. No one says I'm starting an internet company now. That like dates them to the 1990s.
It's like if you built a house and you didn't put electricity in it.
Yes, it's a utility, and I believe Bitcoin is a similar utility, but for the financial markets.
Right.
Yes.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you.
That's the most important part of this, by the way. Like, make sure that you watch till the end. Great.
Now we can say bye.
Bye.
All right, bye, guys.